Many thanks again for rejoining us on the show this morning on ITV. We call it TMI. We have with us in the studio the National Chairman of the Labour Party, Barrister Julius Abure, incidentally a son of the soil from East Northeast Local Government Council of Edo State. Well, Edo State has always had this history of producing national chairman of political parties, so it's really not the first time. So maybe it's part of our giftings to always give to the nation at critical moment leadership, particularly as it relates to political parties, to drive certain ideologies that will change the fortunes of the country. Barrister Julius Abure, a former secretary of the Labour Party, now the national chairman of the Labour Party. Barrister Julius, thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank
you, the people of Edo State.
I will try as much as possible to just go straight to the issues because of time. I know you have a flight to catch up with. The 2023 election, in a sense, has come and gone. There have been some question marks about the outcomes of the election. Yesterday, you gave a press release where you called for the cancellation of the election. Which of the elections are you talking about? Is it the presidential assembly election, the presidential election, the National Assembly election, the governorship election, or the state houses of assembly? Which of the elections?
Well, from our own assessment, we can see that the election generally didn't meet the expectations of Nigerians. Democracy is government by the people, for the people, and by the people. The people is key in any democratic government. And therefore, actions, behaviors that tend to reduce the participation of the people, or that seems to defeat the wishes and aspirations of the people, one can safely conclude that it's no longer democracy. The past election, you can see that the presidential election was seriously manipulated. In the first instance, after the collation of results, it was supposed to be uploaded by Beavers. The server, we were told, was shut down. Beavers didn't work. And that gave room for massive manipulation of that result.
You're talking about manipulation and all of that because your party didn't win the election. Yeah.
Nigerians are the judge, and you are a journalist. If you go around the country, you see that a lot of people will tell you that those results were heavily manipulated. You saw what happened in Lagos, how Beavers didn't work, and those results were manipulated, were forged.
But your party still won in Lagos in the presidential election.
That's
and in several states of the federation.
Like
part of these allegations of manipulation, your party still won some states that hitherto were not Labour Party states as it were.
Well, obviously, we have maintained, and I want to reiterate, that we are very much interested in the process leading to the election, not the outcome of the election itself. We are interested in the outcome of the election, but the processes leading to the outcome of those elections is also key. It's more important. A process that is not transparent, a process that is skewed, obviously will not meet the expectations of the people. We did better in Lagos. The results that we got in Lagos was that after serious manipulations of those results, we were able to win. Ordinarily, the margin of winning in Lagos, in Rivers, in Bayelsa, in Akwa Ibom, name it, would have been higher. And that's why outrightly we didn't waste time to call for the cancellation of the entire result, including...
The burden is on you to prove all of this. For example, one thing that was very clear in this electionary campaign were concerns expressed by even INEC that the Labour Party, for example, didn't have polling agents in many of the polling units across the Federation. In fact, I can't remember the exact number. The Labour Party was lagging behind in terms of number of polling agents needed at polling unit to be able to midwife and perhaps oversee what was happening at that level. wasn't that a major disservice to your party in terms of being able to monitor the outcomes of the election result real time, to be able to justify these claims and allegations that you're making?
Well, the truth of the matter is that it's true that we had a slight shortfall. What was required was about 170-something thousand. I can't remember the figures now. But we had close to 140-something. So the shortfall was minimal. But we had a way of also making provision for those shortfall. You will recall that other political parties joined the party and participated in that election with us. AA, for instance, the AA now, or Accord Party, one of the parties decided to work for us in the presidential election. And they made provision for the shortfall that we had. We even had more than enough agents that was needed to monitor that election. Beyond the official accredited agents, we also had a lot of support groups, a lot of interest groups, a lot of civil society organizations that were also trained, to monitor this election and also give us feedback. And so, even though we had a slight shortfall in the official agents, we made up adequately for it. It was very clear. It wasn't the issue of not having agents. It's a deliberate attempt to defeat the wishes and aspirations of the people. In Lagos, for instance, people were prevented from voting. Ballot boxes were snatched. Results were manipulated. They were written again and again. In Rivers, you saw what played out, and several other states. And this culture of impunity continued even in the governorship and House of Assembly election. I had to speak out yesterday following the manipulation that was about to take place in Enugu and Abia State, where we have won almost all the local government. It was just one remaining. In Abia, for instance, in Obigwa local government, the governor's local government waited for all the results to be collated, and they went to his local government, held INEC officials hostage, and started changing the results. In fact, he attempted to bring in 30,000 votes. As I speak with you now, what the entire result in the INEC server uploaded is about 15,000 votes. But in an attempt to manipulate the results, he turned in 30,000 votes from his local government.
Just one local government?
Yes. But unfortunately for him, INEC officials and some other officials who were there refused to collaborate. And so he ran into a problem with that local government. And that's where we are. They are reconvening today by 7. And I want to say it here clearly. That election will be the turning point of this whole electoral process in the country. Same scenario is playing out in Enugu, like I stated too yesterday, where in one of the local governments, they are trying to also manipulate those results, especially in Okano East local government, where an attempt is being made to change the figures. So it's a culture of impunity everywhere around the country, and I think it's not good for democracy.
All right,
we need to go back to the drawing board to re-evaluate and rejig our electoral process. Because if at the end of the day, people's wishes and aspirations are not allowed to count, if the votes are not counting, then of course people will not be enthusiastic about democracy.
Well, when you say the votes are not counting, there are people who will dispute that, because we have seen that in spite of these shortcomings, the number of Labour Party members in the National Assembly has increased tremendously. I mean, from perhaps 0 level to maybe 10 or 6 or thereabout. Ditto for the House of Representatives. So, and then we're having some results coming out now, even for the State House of Assembly and governorship election, all showing that results are counted. So it will not be completely correct to say the results are not counted. But the point I want to quickly get your attention on, what would you say has been the major driving force for the seeming relevance politically of the Labour Party? Is it the presidential candidate, or is it just the structures of Labour Party, as it were, or the desire to have a clear-cut departure from the past political era?
Well, three main components. First, Labour Party as a party is a brand on its own, and obviously driven by some of us who have the vision over the years. You are aware of my antecedent in the state. I've been in this party for close to 20 years. I've actually prepared the party for what is happening today, and that's why I remained in the party, built it, grew it, laundered the image, and today it has become almost the #1 party in the country. Secondly, the pedigree, the character, the behavior of the presidential candidate, Peter Obi, is also playing a major role in this whole driving force, because he has the image. People believe that he has the competence, he has the capacity, and he has the pedigree to be able to govern the country and move it from where it is now to at least a better country that we that will be able to deliver to the people. The third point too is that the people are equally tired of the existing political parties, and the people actually is yearning for a departure from what other political parties represent. So for me, these are the three main components that is driving the current trend that we're having in the country. You are right to have said that, relatively speaking, Labour Party has made a lot of progress. There's no doubt about it. But the point here is that if the votes were allowed to count the way it ought to be adequately, it's very clear that we would have won the presidency. In spite of all the manipulations, massive manipulations across the country, we are still able to stand this far. And so, obviously, we would have won. And you can see the low turnout in the governorship and House of Assembly election. People feel that the vote in the presidential election did not count. And that was why a lot of them refused to come out, to come and cast their votes in the governorship and House of Assembly election. We had to do a lot of teaching, a lot of political education, a lot of mobilization to even get that number to come out, to come and vote. And if you notice, you see that a lot of young people who participated in the presidential election didn't come out to participate in the governorship election.
Yeah, but the votes counted, as it were. I mean, that's reflected in the number of senators we have today, and the number
would have had more senators,
members of House of Representatives that we have today.
Would have had more senators. Would have had more.
Okay, let's quickly talk about the governorship and state houses of assembly election. We were here all through Saturday and even Sunday to cover the elections and give live feeds and a live update as the election progressed. A whole lot of things were coming, from the field. What's your take on the governorship and House of Assembly election? You mentioned a while ago that a lot of young people didn't come out to vote, arising from what happened in the presidential.
Yes.
Are you not saying that Labour Party is more disposed to young people, or young people are more disposed to Labour Party?
Well, it's vice versa. Labour Party is generally open to every person, all class and all shades of person. But I have more young people driving the process in the party. Younger people believe more in the party because they feel that Labour Party represents a new generation, represent their generation, represent the hope and aspiration of the people. And therefore, young people mostly are the ones driving the Labour Party. And so, young people are well disposed to the party, but the party generally is open to all shades and all classes of people. Even those that you call the elderly are also having a major role to play in the party. They are also participating in the party. Even those that is in the old, in PDP and APC, so to speak, are equally well disposed to the party. And so, generally, the party is a party that is open and free for all. But as of today, I have more young people driving the party.
Are you concerned by this seeming outplay of instances where some people get elected into political offices, and in a sense, they may not necessarily be those who have the capacity to deliver. You have this sort of bandwagon effect, especially in the presidential and National Assembly election, where people just went to the polling units and they're looking for Papa, Mama, Peking, irrespective of who is representing or is vying for that political office. Are you concerned? Isn't that dangerous to political development, particularly when it comes to making adequate laws for the good governance and development of the society?
Well, in the selection of our candidates, we have the best of candidates in terms of education, in terms of capacity, in terms of passion about delivery to the people. I want to believe that we took out time to screen all our candidates before we gave them ticket. The ticket was not just available for every person. And part of what we are trying to change is to change this culture of where you appoint people who obviously have no capacity, doesn't have the competence to drive what an office requires. And therefore, I do not see any Labour Party candidates today or those who won any of our election today who doesn't have the competence to man the office that he has been elected to be. Clearly speaking, our candidates of Labour Party today will make the difference. And you are going to see the departure, a very serious departure in the National Assembly. It will not be rubber stamp. I can tell you that confidently. It will not be rubber stamp as usual. You are going to see robust discussion, robust debate. You are going to see people's-oriented National Assembly driven by the people. We may not have the majority in the National Assembly, but the few that we have will obviously make the difference in terms of standing by the people, in terms of the quality of representation, in terms of the quality of bills that we presented in the assemblies where we will have control, and even in the National Assembly. So it wasn't just a bandwagon effect. It wasn't just a bandwagon effect. It was, they were well selected, and I can assure you that they will give you quality and effective representation. And the people will be proud that they have identified.
We have instances where certain positions, certain constituencies are still subject of litigations, which is something that we were used to with the older parties, so to speak, or with other parties where a candidate emerges and then somewhere along the line another person is used to substitute that candidate, and then it gives room for litigation. Don't you have such problem? And if you have such problem, isn't that reflective of the old order? So how are you really different from the other parties?
Well, what we are looking at now is the how do I put it now? The frequency of it, or the quantum of such incidences. The truth of the matter is that politics is very controversial. It's complex, and it has to do with conflicting interests. And once you have competing and conflicting interests, there is obviously bound to be conflict. There is constantly going to be disagreement. But the level at which you have such incidences is what should matter. So if after conducting primaries in all the constituencies in Nigeria, and you have just one or two incidences of such, it becomes very infinitesimal. I use Edo State, for instance, where we conducted primaries in all the constituencies, in all the senatorial districts and state constituencies. And if you have just 1, 2, 3 incidences of such litigation, it's a pass mark. And once you score over 80 to 90%, it's as good as it's a distinction. So to this extent, we have scored distinction. Okay. Apart from 1 or 2 incidences in Edo State, I can't see any other one. Across the country, we have some incidences across the country. It's a normal process to have such disagreement. The saying goes that you can't satisfy everybody. So once you are able to satisfy the majority of the people, and you have 1 or 2 incidences where there are disagreement, it is tolerable. But it becomes a problem, or it becomes a challenge where 80%. You have such incidences above 50 to 80%, where you have majority, where you have major instances of crisis. That's where it becomes a concern. But where you have a number that is very infinitesimal, then it is a pass mark. And we have done creditably well in this respect.
Let's quickly talk about the just concluded State House of Assembly elections in Edo State. What are your misgivings about the outcomes of the election?
We saw a situation where people were, ballot boxes were snatched. There were, people were prevented from voting in some places. We saw where, in Ego, for instance, where in one of the ward now, where we were already leading, the ballot boxes were confiscated. Somebody went away with the result sheet, went to write that result sheet, brought it to the collation center, and the people resisted it. We have such instances across the state. In Edo Central, for instance, we saw how talks were brought to polling units where you have major supporters. They were prevented from voting. The security officers were watching. We saw instances where people were buying votes, and several irregularities that characterized the election. Talks were used. People were driven away from the collation, from the polling units. Several instances in Edo South, for instance, in Agbado and several other places, ballot boxes were snatched, people were shot. I think at this level of our democracy in the 21st century, I think this should not be the process by which we should select our leaders.
So comparatively, the governorship and state houses of assembly elections, presidential and national assembly elections, how would you score the conducts?
Well, the conduct of the presidential election, one would say, was better than the governorship and state houses of assembly.
Would you say that influenced the state houses and governorship election, and to what extent? The outcome.
Okay, let me answer the first leg of the question first.
Okay.
Was the presidential, what I was trying to say was that the presidential election was better conducted. Where we ran into trouble with the presidential election was that INEC deliberately shut down their server and refused to upload results from the polling unit. And that created room for the elections to be manipulated. And so politicians, especially sitting governors and sitting members of the House of Assembly and other, learned from the errors that played out in the presidential election, and they proved on it in the governorship election. And so, for me, the governorship election was worse conducted because the errors in the presidential election was improved upon in the governorship election. So people saw the loophole that they could manipulate results, they could intimidate people, they could shut down the system, and they did that in the governorship election. So I can say that the gains that we would have benefited from the amendment of the Electoral Act and so on have all been defeated.
These are very weighty allegations that needs to be proven.
We are in court. We've said we are going to court. Of course, we are law-abiding citizens. If it were other political party how do I put it now, would have by now.
There were stories about your party not being allowed to inspect the beavers and all of that. So how did that eventually end? We just want to hear from the horse's mouth.
Yes, for about 10, 11 days. For election petition, you must file within 21 days. Okay. For about 11 days, we didn't allow to inspect election materials until people threatened to go and occupy INEC office before they started allowing us to inspect materials. So it's ongoing. I'm very sure that by today we should be able to file. By yesterday, I'm sure they have filed the election petition.
All right. If you just join us, it's still TMI, beautiful Monday morning. And our guest on the show today is the National Chairman of the Labour Party, Barrister Julius Abure, who is also an indigene of the state, giving us his perspectives on the conduct of the 2023 general elections from the presidential through the National Assembly and state governorship to the state houses of assembly. He's expressed his misgivings about some of the outcomes of the election. You should expect that, and I want to say big thanks to him for creating the time to be here in spite of his busy schedule. Any last word for you before we let you go? One last word.
Well, I want to appreciate Edo people for the support. If there's any state we have support massively, it's Edo State. I appreciate Edo people. I assure you that this stolen mandate will reclaim it, will defend it, will pursue it, and I'm very, very hopeful that the judiciary, for the first time, will do justice.
Okay, only time will tell if the mandate was actually stolen or it was given to the right person. I'm sure the courts will decide that. Anyway, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay.